Hi, I'm Travis, a former visa officer with the U.S. Department of State and a licensed U.S. immigration attorney. Today, I want to talk about a very confusing topic, and that is petition-based visas. While many visas are fairly straightforward, at least in terms of the application process, where you fill out an online application form, you schedule a visa interview, you attend the visa interview, hopefully you're approved, then you can travel to the United States. There are other types of visas that have more than one step, generally speaking, in the process, and they are, as a result, much more complicated. And so that's what I want to talk about. A couple of examples, first of all. What is a petition-based visa? Well, these visas are, for example, O visas, which are reserved for people with extraordinary abilities, maybe in science or art or education or business or even athletics. They could be a P visa, which is generally for athletes or artists or performers and entertainers. Could be an L visa, which is for people that are transferring to the United States with their company. Could be an R visa for a religious worker, or one of the more common types of petition-based visas, an H-1B for a temporary worker who's going to be working in the United States. And then virtually every immigrant visa, which is basically an application for a green card, is a petition-based visa. So what is a petition-based visa? What does that actually mean? Well, I mentioned earlier that it is a two-step process. So step one is a petition or an application which is filed with the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS for short. USCIS is a completely separate entity from the Department of State, which is where you will go for a visa interview. And so what that means is you're essentially dealing with two different organizations, two agencies of the United States government through your application process if you are seeking a petition-based visa. So step one is the petition, the application that's filed with USCIS. Typically, that petition is filed by what's called the petitioner, not the ultimate applicant, though of course there are some exceptions to this. Now, the petitioner in that petition document will explain in writing why the applicant, which is called the beneficiary, why they qualify for the visa, why they deserve the visa, and why they should be approved. And then once that petition is approved by USCIS, then we get to step two of the process, which is to schedule the interview. For most of these visas, at least non-immigrant visas, the applicant will follow the same steps I outlined before. They will fill out an online DS-160 form, they will pay for an interview, schedule an appointment, and then go in for the interview appointment. For immigrant visas, for green card petitions, it is a DS-260, but it's very similar to the DS-160. It's still an online application form that the applicant has to fill out, submit, and then they will eventually schedule a visa interview. So why is the two-step process such an important thing to think about? Well, I think many applicants who are seeking a petition-based visa are under the assumption that if USCIS approves the petition, then they're pretty much done. They're going to get their visa. They will come to the US to work or to live or whatever their goal is. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. There is a guideline document that visa officers follow, which is called the Foreign Affairs Manual, or FAM for short. And there is a provision of the FAM for all petition-based visas, whether it's an O or a P or an H-1B or a green card petition. And it basically says the same thing for each of these different types of visas. It says that an approved petition, which USCIS has approved, is prima facie evidence that the requirements for visa classification have been met. What that means in real English is this is basically proof that the applicant qualifies for the visa. However, as the regulations go on to say, the approval of a petition by USCIS does not relieve the applicant of the burden of establishing visa eligibility. This is where it gets confusing. If USCIS has already determined that you are qualified for a visa, why should you have to prove that you're qualified for the visa again to an employee of a different agency of the US government? Well, the FAM goes on to explain why. And what it says is, remember that USCIS interacts solely with the petitioner. And remember, the petitioner is whoever filed the application. And the petitioner is usually somebody like the employer, or for an artist, it might be an agent. It's generally not the applicant themselves. And so while USCIS has interacted on paper with somebody who says that you're qualified, the interview is the first point during the petition-based process where a U.S. government representative, in this case it's a visa officer, can interact with the beneficiary of the petition. So in other words, this is the first time anybody's actually talked to you, the applicant, the beneficiary, to evaluate whether or not you qualify for the visa. And it goes on to say, additionally, you, the visa officer, benefit from cultural and local knowledge that adjudicators at USCIS do not possess, making it easier to spot exaggerations or misrepresentation in qualifications. And so what this really means is that the visa officer's job is to evaluate your qualifications really from the ground up. They want to evaluate whether or not everything that the petitioner said about you is actually true and accurate. And so let me give you a couple of examples. If we're talking about an O applicant, somebody who has extraordinary abilities in either the sciences or arts or business or athletics, well, an approved O visa petition means that somebody at USCIS evaluated what the petitioner said about you, and they determined that, yes, you do meet the minimum qualifications for an O visa. You possess these extraordinary abilities, whatever they may be. But when you get to your visa interview, you still have to establish that you are extraordinary, that you meet these minimum thresholds, these minimum requirements for the O visa that you seek. Your visa officer is going to be trying to kind of poke holes in what the petitioner has said about you. They're going to try to be verifying whether or not you are truly extraordinary, whether you truly possess the skills and the abilities that the petitioner mentioned to help your petition be approved. If the visa officer finds that you are simply not qualified because you can't explain what makes you extraordinary, then they may actually deny your application. And so the interview for an O visa, and similarly for a P visa, is extremely important. You have to be prepared to explain, to essentially plead your case, to volunteer what makes you either extraordinary, or for a P visa, proof that you are performing at an internationally recognized level of performance, or that you're part of a qualifying exchange program or a culturally unique program. And if you're not prepared to explain these qualifications to your visa officer, you may not be approved. Now, similarly for an L visa or an R visa or an H-1B visa, these are all generally work visas. They enable you to come to the United States to work. Now, an L visa is reserved for managers and executives or employees with specialized knowledge who meet very rigorous qualifications. An R visa is for religious workers who are affiliated with a qualifying religious organization and they're planning to do qualifying religious work in the United States. And then, of course, the H-1B is reserved for applicants that are working in qualifying occupation, and they have met other requirements, such as minimum education requirements. So at these types of visas, for work-related petition-based visas, it is similarly crucial that you're prepared to volunteer an explanation for your visa officer as to why you qualify, why you deserve the visa. Finally, for immigrant visas, you will need to prove that you meet all of the requirements. Whether you're seeking an immigrant visa through a relationship with a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident, you'll have to show that you're truly related to this person. If you're seeking a green card based on your employment or your abilities, you will similarly need to volunteer those qualifications if you are going to succeed. Now, we commonly work with applicants who are preparing for their interviews after their petition has already been approved by USCIS. Now, sometimes we work with these applicants after a previous refusal, and almost always they tell us that the interview caught them by surprise. So, for example, I recently was working with an O1 applicant who had extraordinary abilities in business. And he came to me and said, Travis, I was really surprised because the first question from my visa officer was, what makes you extraordinary? And this was a person who was very humble. He seemed like a very polite person. He was absolutely not prepared to brag about his qualifications and to tell his visa officer all of the different things that made him so extraordinary. This was a person who has been featured in international media. He's won awards. He has advanced degrees. He's founded companies. But he wasn't prepared to, again, brag about all of these things that he's accomplished, which is precisely what his visa officer was expecting. So if you find yourself in a situation where you have an approved petition for a petition-based visa, and you're preparing for your visa interview, reach out to us at ZF Visa. My partner and I are both former visa officers. We've interviewed over 100,000 visa applicants from all over the world. Quite often, these were applicants seeking a visa after an approved petition. And so we will help you understand, first of all, what the criteria is that your visa officer will be evaluating, and then how you can volunteer your qualifications, your situation, your plans, your goals in a way that will hopefully convey that you deserve an approval. Reach out to us at info@zfvisa.com. We'll explain how we might help you prepare, or you can schedule a consultation with us directly from our website at www.zfvisa.com. Best of luck in your visa journey. I hope to speak with you soon.